My name is Solveiga Pakštaitė and I'm 23 years old. I'm operating under Design by Sol Limited, but very soon we'll be spinning out to a new dedicated label company, which is very exciting. I'm actually Lithuanian, but I was born in Norway. So because Lithuania was still under the Soviet Union around the time that my parents decided to start a family, and they didn't want to do that in an unstable country. So yeah, but I've spent most of my life in England. Not at all. None of my family, none of my extended family, no one has started their own company. I had never wanted to be one. It sounded like my idea of hell, because I think I didn't understand that an entrepreneur isn't necessarily. I thought if you own your company, as a designer, you are no longer allowed to be the creative person who does all the design work. I thought you had to be bogged down with like numbers and things like that, which is sort of true, but I didn't realize that you can just hire in someone to be a CEO over you to take care of that. And I was like, oh, well, that sounds great. But still, like even when I made that realization, I still didn't want to start my own company. But it was kind of I got a lot of attention for my project in final year. So I entered it in, well, I kind of finished it, and I was kind of sick of it, same as everybody else, and everyone else was entering their projects into something called the James Dyson Award. So I thought, you know what, it's free to enter, it only takes 10 minutes to write up an application. So I did it and forgot about it. And then I started my new first graduate job, was just going to do a career path, normal thing, and then I ended up winning the UK James Dyson Award. And then the press went crazy, like loads of companies started wanting to invite me to meetings, so it happened accidentally. It is a bioreactive food expiry label, which basically means that it's a label that you can gear up to act in the exact same way that food does, and it actually experiences decay and then actually knows when your food goes off. I was in a unique position. The first time I thought that actually this might be quite interesting was we did this. It was about 2 months into this project where I literally just first came up with the idea of using this jelly to kind of do this kind of thing. And at uni we did something called a industrial review evening, that's what it was called, where they got loads of designers and other people from industry to go around and have a look at our initial concepts and just kind of give us some advice. Super helpful. Really good, because I spoke to one of the guys I spoke to was a packaging designer, and as soon as I started telling him about my idea, he was like, you need to protect this. And it was strange to hear that when I hadn't even finished the project. But I think even if I didn't want to, I wasn't sure if I'd take it forward or not, but around that time I'd actually also won a scholarship from the James Dyson Foundation for £1,000. The idea was for that money would cover the development of the product and building prototypes. It made sense for everyone else who won it, because they were making prototypes of metal, wood, like with electronics, and it was quite expensive. But by the end of the year of playing with plastic and jelly, I still had the £1,000. So I was like, okay, well, I'll file a patent. At least if nothing happens with it, at least I'll know a bit more about IP. I filed that last May. Because I was advised that if I did want to do something with it, I wasn't allowed to show it in the public domain. Of course, that would write off the IP. So then I did that before our graduate show, which was in last June. And during my graduate show, I met a lady called Christina, who says that she develops technologies to commercialization. She found me during my graduate show and she was like, "This is amazing. Have you protected your IP?" And I was like, "Yes, I filed thing 2 weeks ago. And she was like, great, like, I'll go find you some money, let's make this happen. And this was before I'd even won the James Dyson Award. That happened in September, so a couple of months after she was already interested. So I think I was in a unique position in that I had someone who deals with tech commercial, yeah. So that was, I think, she kind of put in this idea of, as soon as I started talking to her, I was like, I just want to sell this to someone, you know, I'm not interested in running a company. I kept telling her I don't want to run a company, but a year on, I'm still here. Christina Reiko, she's now the CEO of my company. She runs a consultancy that basically, a lot of what she does is bring in grant money. She writes grant applications and then she kind of does strategy building and that kind of thing. She's very, very smart. She's, yeah, her strength lies in IP commercialization. So very, very good person to have on board, and we still work together today. The most important thing was the media kind of effect it had, and it meant that companies such as, like, I was doing an internship and I was sneaking off to do meetings with Coca-Cola in my lunch break. It was ridiculous. And it got to like December when the internship was supposed to finish, and I was like, do you know what? They asked me to stay on, but I was like, do you know what? Come January, I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm going to see where this goes. And that was terrifying. So it was interesting that from June, when I was saying I just want to sell this thing, and then it got to December and I was like, I'm learning so much. Like when you're going, I was being thrown into meetings with these huge companies, having to like present this idea and as a venture, and I realized, I think it was, I still kind of thought I was kidding myself. I was like, I'm doing this for the learning experience. I'm doing this for the learning experience because I realized that I'm probably going to learn way more than any of my friends sitting in their junior design positions. And even if this whole thing falls on its face, at least I will have learned so much. But now I think since I put in my full time from January, it has gone, like, everything has gone so much better because I've been able to put my full attention to it, and people just respond to that and show that I'm really, like, it shows that there's no point doing it half-heartedly. Nothing's going to happen. Grants, free money at the moment. I haven't done an investment round yet. In terms of the biggest ones have been from the government. So Innovate UK are the Ministry of giving technology companies money. It's fantastic. I initially, the first grant I won, Christina, it's called an innovation voucher, and it basically pays for someone else to kind of help you start off, which is basically paid for Christina's salary for like 6 months. So that was like £5,000. And then there were like awards that we entered. So I won the Mayor of London's Low Carbon Entrepreneur Prize. So that was like, it was supposed to be £20,000, but then they picked a runner-up, so I got 15. And then another huge interesting thing that I'm involved with is an incubator at Imperial College. It's called Climate Kick. It's funded by 250 institutions and companies throughout Europe. So they don't expect anything back. They're just kind of giving away like money to help like sustainable kind of reducing carbon companies. So I got I think it was 20,000 euros from that, so that was like £14,000. Where there's 3 tiers, and every time you go up to the next stage, so I'm ready for stage 2 now, I'm going to get another chunk of money. And they do this fantastic thing where they send you to like different master classes. Like you get Harvard Business School people teaching you like how to run a marketing campaign and that kind of thing. So it's really a good education. So the education value is huge from that as well. So to date we've raised about over £80,000. So at the moment we are working towards a market trial with a UK retailer who I can't name at the moment. Hopefully by the end of this year or early 2016. Okay, so my course, most of them went out and got design jobs, but there is the exception of 2 of my very close friends from my course. They've actually started a studio together, so they're actually doing their own thing as well, and they're doing very well at it. But that's kind of consultancy, so they do projects for other people rather than doing their own products. But it's only us 3 really that are doing anything, anything for ourselves. About 12 hours a day. And weekends. No, but I mean, some weeks are just more hectic. Other weeks, like for example this week, I'm just waiting on a lot of stuff. So I'm like flat hunting at the moment, so that's what I'm doing. So I love the flexibility of it. I love that, for example, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example. There's something going on in the middle of the day and I can just go to it and then make up the time in the evening, for example. So I love that flexibility. It allows me to, as well as like if I was invited to speak at a conference in Hong Kong, and because I didn't have like a 9 to 5 to go back to, I stayed on for an extra 4 days to just have a look around. So stuff like that just really makes up for it. And I think when you're having a very important and productive meeting, but it's like in a pub on the Thames, you're like, this is great. So that kind of things makes up for the time that you have to put in, because it doesn't, a lot of it doesn't feel like work because it's so exciting and exhilarating. You're just, the more you do, the more you learn. Well, I'm not successful yet. I think they were really excited by me winning the James Dyson Award, but then when I told them that I wasn't, after my internship, I wasn't going to go work for another employer. They're both academics, they're both university teachers, so it's a completely different world. They were terrified. They were like, well, who's going to pay your salary? And I'm like, well, technically me, but I'm not going to pay myself yet. And they were like, what? I don't understand. Like, they were terrified. I think they felt bad that they can't give me any advice because they have literally no clue, and there's no one in my family that I can turn to for like free advice really. So, but now they see, I'm really pleased that they see it as like less of a big deal, because they just see it as like my job. And luckily, it's actually this month I'm setting up my first ever payroll, so yay! So Bumpmark came about when I did a placement year between second and final year, and I was working for a design and ergonomics consultancy, and one of the projects that I had a big part of was a 6-month project about, it was for guide dogs for the Blind Association. That would be terrible. And it was all about public transport, but the point is that I spent 6 months talking to blind people almost every day. It was about public transport, but you start thinking about blind people so much, because I was doing interviews, like travel observations, workshops, all sorts. So I'd always go back to them and ask them, how do you measure how much milk goes in their tea? And they have a gadget for that. It's amazing. How do you match your clothes? And they'd always have a cool answer. And then one day I asked them, how do you know when your food goes off? And they were like, we don't. And I was like, oh, come on, you must have a cool gadget for that. And they were like, no, we really don't. And I was like, so you know how much milk to put in your tea, but you don't know if that milk's off or not? And they were like, no. I was like, that's terrible. So I knew then that it was a problem that was so interesting that when I go back to final year, that's going to be my final major project. I was exploring lots of different avenues at the start, so I was like, it can either be like audio or like touch. And I should mention that as soon as I started learning what I did about a lot of gadgets geared towards blind people, because the production runs are so small, because it's for a specific group of people, each unit costs a lot more to make up for the tooling costs, and then that actually prohibits the people who you've designed it for to buy it, because only a third of blind people are in paid employment, and the other 2/3 are actually living on the poverty mark. So it's a big like vicious cycle. So as soon as I started this project, I was like, right, I'm going to have to create a solution that adds a value to everybody. So I was like, audio is a bit like weird, and I threw away audio straight away because you need to do electronics, and it was just going to be far too expensive. So then I was like, what else could I do? And one day I was looking at a banana that I'd forgotten about, and it was starting to go brown and the skin was starting to go a bit manky, and I was like, why doesn't our plastic packaging do that, like, and let us know when it's like on its way out? Because it starts to go a bit like knobbly as well. I was like, that's information that not even sighted people have, like about when our food's going off. So I became obsessed with this like bumpy package appearing. So I marched off to the material science department. I was like, okay, great, I need a material that changes its texture when in reaction to a food inside, and they were like, ha, are you crazy? Like, that doesn't exist. Like, that's a nice idea, but that's it. And I realized then that I was barking up the wrong tree. So then I went off to speak to some biologists, chemists, people who actually understand food decay, and I was like, okay, so what can I use to like maybe mimic this? And one of the scientists said, why don't you use jelly? And I was like, what? And he said, yeah, jelly, because it's a protein, it can really match different meats well for that reason, and it's a thermo-reversible gel, meaning that it goes back to a liquid when it completely expires. Maybe you can do something with that. So then I went to the labs. All my other friends were in the workshop doing chairs and furniture and cool devices and things like that, and I was just in my kitchen playing with jelly. Eventually I got this like layered structure to work. So as the gel goes bad, it turns into a liquid, and it removes this barrier that then lets you touch a bumpy layer. So it changes from smooth to bumpy. So yeah, I got that to work. Throughout, when I veered off this electronic audio thing, apart from my supervisor, everyone who I went to get advice on this bumpy thing, they would, instead of giving me the advice I went to ask for, they would give me a half-hour lecture and waste my whole meeting slot telling me that if they were my supervisor, they would have never let me do this project. Like, why don't you go back to this electronic one? The technology exists. You're trying to basically only get a first, not maybe do something actually interesting with your final major project. So I felt quite, not by my supervisor himself, but like by everyone else who I went to advice for, they were like, just go get your first, get out, you're a good student. And I was like, I don't care, this is really interesting. So I decided to go. Everyone's like, you're going to fail, you're going to fail, you're going to fail. I got a first, by the way, because I did make it work. But yeah, it was interesting how my uni just encouraged me to do the easy route. I mean, even through school, whenever we got a project, I'd always try to think of an interesting way of doing it, and then I sometimes didn't even get good grades because I didn't tick the boxes, but I've always hated doing that, so I've always looked for a more interesting way of doing this. So I guess in a way, being an entrepreneur has always kind of suited me, and just didn't realise it. If it's a product, then my top advice is enter it into some competitions, because you'd get the best feedback ever. If you win, it's a good idea, and it takes a lot of the risk out, and you're already going in saying, I've won this award. It's the best way of getting honest feedback, and if you never hear back, then it doesn't mean it's not worthwhile, but like it's still a good tester. And I think just enter some competitions. Try to go to events within that area. So like if you've designed something like a bone conducting headphone or something like that, then go to some audio conventions and then just say, hey, so I've been doing some research into bone conduction for like music, like what do you think? And just getting a conversation started. So just kind of, I think, don't just blindly go and start a company. You really need to see if there's some interest there first. So I think the easiest way in terms of products is entering competitions and just chatting to people within that field. But other than that, if you get good responses from that, absolutely go for it. You will learn so much.